Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. Now would be a great time to check in on social media, let everybody know that you're attending this fine meeting, and afterwards go ahead and turn your cell phones off and enjoy your chance to have an hour out of the day without it. So, I'd like to point out we have several new corporate members, and so we're very excited about how the corporate membership is taking off this year, but we have added this just recently, the Area Office on Aging, UTMC, Raymond, and the ZEP Center. So if you would, a round of applause for our corporate members. To get things rolling today, I'd like to invite Mark Parker to come to the podium and deliver a reflection and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good afternoon. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than an unsuccessful man with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, "Press on," has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. Calvin Coolidge, Amherst College, 1894. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mark. As we begin our meeting today, I'd like to thank and acknowledge Hartman Bogen Financial Planning for being this month's sponsor. So, Donna, thank you very much. Does anyone have any guests with them today? If so, please come to the floor mic.
President Travis, I'd like to introduce Mike Story. I think he knows half the people in the room already, so joined us today.
Thank you. Glad you're here.
President Travis, I'd like to introduce to you, I think everyone here knows Jim as well, including Mike. Jim Walrod, President of Front Door Marketing.
Excellent. Welcome.
Fellow Rotarians, I have with me Jenny Vansel, who is the Development Coordinator at Lot Industries, also on the board of the Toledo Zoo, the Boy Scouts, and last but not least, Keep Toledo Lucas County Beautiful. Also with me is Patrick Marchman. He's a principal at K&M Sustainability, where they work on climate adaptation, resiliency, hazard mitigation, and he also serves on a number of nonprofit leadership teams, so not a board member of Keep Toledo Lucas County Beautiful yet.
Wow. Welcome, everybody.
President Travis, I have with me Ron Wells Jr., who is the Executive Assistant to Commissioner Pete Gerken. He also sits on the board with me at Toledo Opera.
Excellent. Welcome. Glad you're here.
President Travis, I have with me my brand new colleague, Caitlin Sigler, who is the Director of Development over the Heart Walk at the American Heart Association.
Awesome. Welcome.
President Travis, I am pleased to introduce Sally Gladwell, who is with Manick and Smith Group and is really here just covering for Dean, who couldn't make it today. So,
well, thank you for covering. It's nice to hear you. I know we have at least one visiting Rotarian. Mr. Dale, are you here? There you are. Dustin Dale from Reynolds Corners, current president of Reynolds Corners. Do we have any other visiting Rotarians? Hearing none. Okay. Kurt Church, would you please come to the podium and give a demonstration on our new Google Calendar? No, not new.
Thank you. Well, not a demonstration, just instructions. Who reads the Spoke regularly? All right, that's good. First, a disclosure, I am by no means a tech person. but I do like what it's able to do. So we have an event calendar that you can subscribe to that I created for your events. Instead of having all those lovely invitations, you can just subscribe to this. We try to keep it up with all the Monday speakers and all the events that are coming up. All right, let's see if the slides work. Oh, hey, all right, that's enter. It's pretty simple, 4 steps. You go to your device, open a calendar, you look for other calendars, click add. You take a, did I do that? I didn't do that. Nice and close for you. From URL, you enter the calendar's address that you would copy and paste, and then you'll see the listing under other calendars. Is it on? I don't have my glasses on. Oh. All right, so you can see this red circle. That's where you would find the link to the subscribable calendar, and all those things you see there on the dates. I try to keep up at least once a week to update it. See? User, but not technologically talented. So this is an example for the iPhone. You'd go to your calendar, click calendars on the bottom. This small box will pop up. You add calendar, add subscription calendar from URL. You go down to this, and this gobbledygook of alphanumeric, you copy from that iCal, and you can pop it in there, and then hit subscribe, and it'll pop up with the rest of your calendars. And we'll try to keep it updated as much as possible. You don't have to do anything. How many iPhone users, out of curiosity? All right, we're about 60-40, it looks like. So your other choices, of course, Google, iOS, or Google standard. So the next one is Google, very similar. Oops, stay. You go to your Google or Google operating system, add the calendar, same thing there from URL, paste the gobbledygook into your spot, and you will be subscribed to this calendar. That's it. Not too hard, and you don't have to have all those invitations, and it's there for you at your leisure. Thanks very much for listening. Happy calendaring.
Gobbledygook. I'm going to have to remember that one. Okay. Tim Ryan, would you please come to the podium for a polio update?
Thank you, Travis. Good afternoon, my friends, Rotarians, guests. And if you guys would indulge me for a minute, I've always wanted to come to the podium and have everyone stand up. So if you guys are my friends, you will please stand up if you're capable. Okay, I see most of you guys are friends. Now, here's what I'd like to do. I'm actually going to learn something from this exercise. Everyone in the room who has seen a case of polio, please sit down. Everyone in the room who has a family member who is or has been a victim of polio, either death or other restrictions, please sit down. Everyone who has a friend of the family who was a victim of polio, please sit down. Okay, so I'm guessing maybe 20% of the room, and a lot of you people are old. If everyone else would just take a look at what of the people standing and agree or not that we got about 20% of this room has no experience with polio whatsoever. If you would, please sit down. That's a very interesting statistic, and it's skewed, and this is a small sample and all of that, but about 20%, 25% have no experience with polio in their entire lives. If we were having this discussion at a Toledo Rotary Club, 1983, 1985, so 50 years ago, everyone would have had experience with polio, every single one. We can go to small Hicksville, Ohio, whatever, a long time ago. They virtually wiped out their 6th grade, so their 6-year-olds. Came into this little town, and you know, there's only so many first graders in class, and all of a sudden they're dying. And that's what happened in one of our communities. I'll be brief on this. If we were having this conversation 50 years ago, everyone would have been affected by polio. Your parents would have been scared to death of it. We'd have had 1,000 cases in a day. Every day, every single day, 1,000 cases. That's what we faced. 20% of the room here today has never had any experience with polio. That starts to become a problem in a sense that we have been so successful. When we brought in Itzhak Perlman 50 years ago, we were the first, this club, was the first ones to raise $100,000 for the eradication of polio, putting all of Rotary on the map as somebody that was serious about getting rid of this disease. And my numbers, are accurate as of last Thursday. In the entire world, we got 7 cases. 2 of them in Pakistan, 5 of them in Afghanistan, all in the same general area. You know, we are, as you've been hearing me say for years now, we are this close. The question is are we going to finish? So that's a question that we will be asking. If we don't finish, it's just a matter of time before it comes back to us. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. And thank you for all standing.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Thank you, Tim. 7 cases in the world. I mean, I look back when I joined this club in 2015, and I believe that year there was about 40 or 50 cases total in the world. And I remember them saying, that's amazing. But to think of the impact all the clubs in the world have had in eradicating a disease, it really does tell you the power of this group when it works together and in tandem with other clubs as well. So just amazing news. Tim, thank you for that update. I want to make sure we get to our speaker today, but I do want to congratulate Mark Arudia. Are you here? Where's Mark? Mark, would you please stand? Mark Arudia received the 2023 Distinguished Hispanic Ohioans Award for the Greater Toledo region. So that's fantastic and well-deserved. Congratulations, Mark. And now I'd like to invite Janina Douglas to the podium to introduce our speaker today, Scudder Mackey. Janina.
Thank you, President Travis. Scudder, I wanted to let you know you can take this mic out of here if you need to, too. Okay? I am so pleased and honored to be introducing our speaker today, Scudder Mackey. Scudder's academic credentials are outstanding. He has a PhD in geology, specializing in, wait for it, fluvial sedimentology. But he always makes everything so easy to understand. Dr. Mackey is the chief of the Office of Coastal Management in the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. That means he and his team are responsible for the coasts and coastal wetlands of the state of Ohio. And since he has taken over that team, he has brought incredible energy to that job, growing it from a few dozen projects to currently, as you'll see, just over 140 projects underway, with an outlook for adding almost another 100 in the next year. Scudder and his team are restoring the resources of Ohio's Lake Erie coastline. And in other words, we should all be so happy to know that Scudder and his team are where some of our tax dollars are going. So let us welcome Dr. Scudder Mackey.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. The lunch is fabulous. Hopefully I won't, sort of zone out here a bit as I eat or digest the good meal. Really look forward to talking to you today. I did have a chance to speak, I think, at your regional meeting or district meeting, maybe about a year and a half ago, talked about Lake Erie. I'm not going to give as comprehensive a talk here as I did there, but I will talk more about the coastal wetlands work we're doing, a little bit about harmful algal blooms, and some of the innovative work that we're doing in the western basin of Lake Erie, and also in the Maumee River. So I think that'll be of interest to you. I'll try to keep this presentation a little shorter, so more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. So I think I have to turn this on. There we go. All right, intro slide. Yes, I'm with the Office of Coastal Management. We're based in Huron, Ohio. One of the interesting things about our office, we did have an office in Sandusky, but after the pandemic, we are the only division in ODNR that was allowed to go 100% remote. So my office is 100% remote, except we also have the Old Woman Creek National Estuarine Research Reserve in Huron, Ohio. It is a wetland research facility. That is part of my shop as well. So I do have staff that are there on a permanent basis, and some of our coastal management staff also work there intermittently. I actually have to go in and sign permits and documents and things of this sort periodically, but we are fortunate in that we can work remote from home. And for the type of work we do, that is good. We have coastal engineers on staff. They do technical site visits along the shoreline, and working remotely has not hampered that at all because they can set up meetings, they come in, pick up a state vehicle, and they'll go out and do their technical site visits. So it's worked out very well. And I would also say that we have been, because we are remote, we've been able to hire certain types of employees who are very difficult to hire these days, surveyors and engineers. They are at a premium, and the ability to work remote is something that some of these folks are looking for. So just want to plug that working remote is not necessarily a bad thing. So what I want to talk about are the types of services that we offer out of our office. What do we do? One of the things we do is we try to promote public access and try to educate. We have education and outreach programs to educate people about Lake Erie. And we publish two coastal access guides, one that's focused on the shoreline and one that is focused on the tributaries. This is a compendium of all the public accessible sites to Lake Erie. So if you have a kayak or if you want to walk down to the lake, you can take one of these guides. They're free, and we have them at various sites across the coast where you can look and find out how you can get and actually touch the water on Lake Erie. We also have a coastal atlas, which is a compendium of all sorts of different types of information. At the district meeting, I did bring a bunch. I didn't bring them today. Folks, I had foot surgery about 4 weeks ago, so I have a boot on and difficult. But we are more than happy to provide these the coastal atlases to you folks as well. Really good for understanding more about Lake Erie. We provide technical assistance. I mentioned this just a few minutes ago. We do have coastal engineers on staff. And primarily we focus on coastal erosion issues along the shoreline. And I think many of you remember 2019 and 2020, we had near record high water levels. And we've seen an increase in the severe storms and the magnitude of the storms that we've had along the coast. And so we experienced catastrophic erosion along many reaches of shoreline, the unprotected portions of the shoreline. And that caused a lot of damage to private property and also public property, municipal properties. We manage the sand resources along the shore. Many of you don't know that the beaches we have, they are continually replenished by sand that moves by waves laterally along the shoreline. We have seen a reduction in the amount of sand in the system, so we want to maintain those sand resources so we can maintain the beaches. Obviously, it's important from a tourism perspective and also to access the lake. And beaches also are a natural form of shore protection. We deal with drainage and groundwater issues along the coast and coastal resiliency. I understand someone said climate resiliency here. That's something we're focused on. We'll have to have a conversation about that. Yep, thumbs up. Gotcha. Okay. A couple examples here. This was in 1998, actually a large rotational slide. This is Paynesville. If you go to the eastern part of the Ohio Lake Erie shoreline, it's clay bluffs. They're made of glacial till. And in this case, it's actually groundwater driven. There was a leaking water line. The sediment becomes super saturated and very heavy, and you have a rotational slump. And you can see that this is probably about a 40-foot high bluff. And by the way, when this slump came down, there was a car that also went down into the lake at the same time. So this is catastrophic erosion. This was in 1998, but we had similar events like this occurring just a couple of years ago when we had high water levels. And then with the severe storms, this is up at the Bay Point area, and you can see the waves actually coming across the road and a lot of the debris that's strewn along on the road. What are the challenges that we deal with? I think you can recognize this is Maumee Bay State Park, and I can go back here. Harmful algal blooms. I think you're all very much aware of that here in Toledo. We have harmful algal blooms in the Western Basin. We also have it in the Maumee River as well. And I thought many of you may have lived through the Toledo water crisis that occurred, was it 2014, I believe? And that's when harmful algal bloom, the microcystin toxin, was drawn into the Toledo water intake, and wasn't able to be treated properly, and it shut down the water supply. That was a wake-up call across the nation, basically. And the state has taken a series of steps since then to try to reduce the nutrient loads that cause and drive these harmful algal blooms. Other challenges that we have, loadings and water quality degradation, that's the nutrient loads. We see a lot of degraded habitat. We've lost a lot of our coastal wetlands. I think about 95% of them, if I understand correctly, here in Northwest Ohio. Great Black Swamp is gone. We'll never restore all of that, but we can do what we can, especially along the coastline, and that's the work that we're doing. Invasive species are a problem. Phragmites in particular, but there are other invasive species also in the fishery. And then there's, we're continually monitoring land use changes that occur and increasing development. Development does destroy habitat, and it also can degrade water quality. Erosion we talked about, that's the shore erosion, sand management, and then public access. These are the types of things that we work on. A little bit about Lake Erie. I have some other slides, I'm not going to show them today, but this is a bathymetry map of Lake Erie produced by NOAA. It's a really neat map, by the way. And where we are, and it's behind the flag here, we're right here at the very western end of Lake Erie in Toledo, as you well know. Water flows out of the upper Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, Huron, and Lake Superior, comes down the St. Clair River through Lake St. Clair, which is a very shallow lake. This right here is the St. Clair Delta. It's the largest freshwater delta in the world. Okay? It's also home of the Walpole First Nation in Canada. This is the Detroit River, and about 82% of the water in Lake Erie comes down the Detroit River and into Lake Erie from the upper Great Lakes. So what happens in the upper Great Lakes affects water levels in Lake Erie. We have three basins. We have the Western Basin, we have the Central Basin, and we have the Eastern Basin. So water flows down through Lake Erie, and this right here is the headwaters of the Niagara River, flows down the Niagara River, over Niagara Falls into Lake Ontario. So that's how water moves through the system. The Western Basin is by far and away the shallowest basin. It has a very silty, fine-grained bottom, so when you have storms, it resuspends a lot of the sediment. So a lot of times you see it gets a little dirty, a little cloudy. And it's also one of the most productive basins, sub-basins in Lake Erie. Central Basin is a little bit deeper, about, let me back up here, It's about 70 feet on average deep. And then the deepest basin is the eastern basin. It's about 210 feet deep. That's the deepest part of Lake Erie. And the eastern basin over here is very much different than the central basin and the western basin. It's a little bit more like the upper lakes where the water is clear, it's colder. And the fish communities there are a little bit different. There's a lot of lake trout over on that side of the lake. It isn't near as productive either. So where we're going to go is this. First, I'll start here in Sandusky Bay. This is actually a drowned river mouth. And there are two sub-bays, the inner bay and the outer bay. We're doing a lot of work in Sandusky Bay. It's unique, at least to Lake Erie. However, there are drowned river mouths similar to this up along the western shoreline of Lake Michigan. So what we learn here is translatable to other places in the Great Lakes. And after that, I'll head over to Toledo itself, and I'll show you a couple projects that we're working on through our H2 Ohio program. And you'll get a feel for the type of work we're doing there, primarily for water quality improvement and nutrient reduction. One other thing that I want to talk to you about is water levels. If you look at the orientation of Lake Erie, and I'm having problems with this, it's oriented basically from southwest to northeast. Our prevailing winds are out of the southwest, but a lot of times we get storms that come out of the northeast, and usually with strong winds. This is the shallowest and the smallest of the Great Lakes. And when you have these storms, what happens is that the wind actually pushes water from one end of the lake to the other. And I don't know if you folks remember, just this last year, in 2022, December 23rd, here in Toledo, we had, remember that's when the temperatures went like around 30 below or something like that. And we had a really bad storm, and it blew water, pushed water to Buffalo. And the water level in the Maumee River at the NOAA water level gauge dropped 12 feet. And over a period of about 8 to 10 hours. And many of these are called sesh events, where you have strong winds and it pushes water from one side of the lake to the other. There are cases where the difference in the water surface elevation is 16 to 18 feet between Buffalo and Toledo, which is absolutely amazing. It's a tilted water surface. Look at this as a giant bathtub, okay? And you just tilt it and you can see the water just tilting up. That happens in this lake. It happens in the other lakes as well, but not near as bad. And so what happens is during these major storm events, when you're thinking about erosion, this is a resiliency question. When you think about erosion and flooding and things of this sort, is that during these sesh events, it's not just the static water levels that make a difference, but also the water levels and how they change during these sesh events. And Northwest Ohio, there's not a lot of elevation over here. So if you have a strong storm out of the northeast, it pushes water. And there were some storms in the late 90s that I remember, because I actually remember walking on people's property waist deep in water, where the sesh event pushed water up right over the dikes and flooded, I think it was about 170 homes in the Sand Beach area along in Northwest Ohio. So what I'm saying is that Lake Erie, because it's small, it's very dynamic and it's highly variable in terms of the water levels and the impacts that these water levels have on the coastline. Let's go into the Sandusky Bay. Sandusky Bay, this is, for those of you, this is the city of Sandusky. This is where the Cedar Point Amusement Park is. I figure that's probably a benchmark that you'll probably recognize. This is the Sandusky River that flows from the south to the north, and it flows through Fremont and then works its way down, comes into Muddy Creek Bay, then flows into the inner Sandusky Bay. And this is the Edison Bridge here, where I was delayed getting here because of traffic. They were working on the bridge. We have the Bayview Causeway and then the Norfolk Southern Railroad line. And then it flows out into the outer Sandusky Bay and then out past the Cedar Point Chaussee here and the Bay Point Spit. And this is Marblehead, and that's where the Marblehead Lighthouse is located. So water flows from left to right here. And one of the things that we try to do, this is called the Sandusky Bay Initiative, which we started to develop in 2014 and have been working on it ever since, is how do you go about doing restoration? How do you improve water quality? How do you improve habitat in these systems? And a lot of the investments that have been made historically are isolated investments. They are isolated projects. And I call it random acts of restoration or random acts of conservation. What we ended up doing is looking at this system. This is 64 square miles of water. It's a good sized system. And considering this as a system, and we know that water moves from left to right. How many of you have heard of a stormwater treatment train? What that is that if you have stormwater from a rain or storm, and there are probably stormwater treatment trains here in the city of Toledo, you have a series of different types of devices that help to trap and hold the water and remove the nutrients and remove the sediments. And what happens is that the water moves from one site to the next until when it comes out at the bottom end, it's relatively clear. It's like a filtration system. So what we've done is expanded that to the entire Sandusky Bay system. So these light green areas here are areas where we are in the process of actually constructing coastal wetlands, designing them, and actually a number of these have been constructed and more are being constructed as we get funding. And the idea is, and you can see the change, this is how water moves through, that's what these arrows are showing. You can see that they start off pretty brown here because the water that comes out of the Sandusky River is pretty brown. It's about 80, I think it's probably about 88% agricultural land. So as the water moves progressively through these wetland complexes, which we're in the process of constructing, the water becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. So by the time it gets to Lake Erie, we've removed most of the nutrients and processed most of the nutrients along with the sediment. That's the plan, okay? This is called landscape conservation design. So our goals are to improve Sandusky Bay water quality, 40% reduction in phosphorus, and much higher reductions in nitrogen, because that's what drives a lot of the harmful algal blooms. Sandusky Bay has harmful algal blooms, very severe harmful algal blooms. We want to restore coastal wetland and fish and wildlife habitat. All of these wetlands, this is nursery habitat for fisheries. And this is one of the most degraded and probably the most significant habitat loss that we have in these systems is a loss of fish nursery habitat. Quiet water areas that are in wetlands or in semi-protected areas. Obviously, we want to eliminate the harmful algal blooms. And in the process of doing this, we want to promote public access and recreation. So this is what we're trying to do at the Sandusky, in the Sandusky Bay initiative. I'm going to take you to a project located right here, and what I want you to note, this red thing right here is the Sandusky Federal Navigation Channel. That navigation channel provides access for ships that come into the Sandusky coal dock, and it's maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's design depth is 27 feet. It's very similar to the Toledo Ship Channel. So one of the things that we're doing is that in 2015, the state of Ohio passed Senate Bill 1, which eliminates open lake disposal of dredge material into the Ohio waters of Lake Erie, okay? And this is done because we want to reduce contaminant loads into the water and reduce turbidity. It's for protecting Lake Erie and improving water quality, okay? In Ohio, we dredge between 1.2 to 1.5 million cubic yards a year out of the 8 federal navigation channels. It represents about 40% of all the material that's dredged in the Great Lakes. So we had 5 years to figure out what to do because all of this was being dumped into the lake, okay? What are you going to do with about 1.2 million cubic yards of sediment each year? So we ended up constructing a series of sediment processing facilities at many of these harbors where the material is placed in an upland area, containment area, and then it's processed, it's blended, and it's now being used for economic benefit. And we have a number of these types of projects along the coast. But what we did in Sandusky is this project, the Cedar Point Causeway project. This is the Cedar Point Causeway, and this is a picture in December. That's the Cedar Point Amusement Park. This is the Chaussee. So Lake Erie's up here. This is East Sandusky Bay. This is the Outer Bay. What we did is created a 32-acre impoundment. It's a nature-based design. It's permeable. It's designed to move. It's resilient. And what we've done, there's going to be at least 2, possibly 3 dredge cycles. We have a south cell and a north cell. And what we did just this last year, about a year ago, is we pumped 140,000 cubic yards of dredge material into that cell, okay? And we're letting it dewater and compact, and we'll, again, at the end of September, we'll do it once again. And as this cell is filled, we'll move into this southern cell. And the idea is eventually we will open this back up to the lake, but what we're going to do is grade it and put sort of an undulating surface and a channel through it, and we're going to restore a coastal wetland with fish and wildlife habitat. So we found a way to create new coastal wetlands or restore coastal wetlands that were once there, beneficially using dredge material, okay? It's a challenge, especially in these turbid waters. And as I mentioned, Sandusky Bay is very shallow, as is the Western Basin. So waves, that's the reason Sandusky Bay, when you look at it, looks brown, because it's so shallow. And this is an example. This is the South Cell. By the way, we constructed this over the winter, so this is actually ice on Sandusky Bay. But in the late summer, this is the South Cell. And I think you can tell that there's a difference in water quality. You see where the waves are? It's very brown. This is almost clear. You can actually see down to the bottom, and we actually have plants starting to grow, aquatic plants growing there. So turbidity, so anything you can do to basically attenuate or absorb wave energy will help you do this. And then we'll end up with something that looks like this. Now this is, oops, I'm not doing well here. It'll look something like this when we get done. Maybe, if we're lucky. We have to figure it out. I see Sally's sort of smiling at me. So I've worked with Sally in the past on some projects, so glad you're a guest. So this is an innovative approach. This is the first time this has ever been done in the Great Lakes. It's an innovative design. It's risky, but we think it's worthwhile because if it's successful, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, US EPA, which has about $400 million plus coming in, they would like to see this type of approach expanded to other areas in the Great Lakes where we can do a lot more in the way of innovative ways to restore coastal wetlands. Okay. Let's go to the Inner Bay. I'm going to just focus in on some other projects that we have. These are predominantly H2 Ohio projects, which is the governor's water quality program. We are focused in the Department of Natural Resources about creating wetlands, upland wetlands and coastal wetlands. This is where the Edison, this is where the Edison Bridge would be, and so this is Muddy Creek Bay. This is the mouth of the Sandusky River coming through and out. We have a series of projects along the south shore here in the Pickle Creek Wildlife Area. We've restored a 44-acre wetland, coastal floodplain and wetland at Pickerel Creek. We have some really interesting shoreline designs, nature-based barrier designs, where we're creating a nature-based barrier that it can flex and move if you want, but behind it we're actually creating wetlands, and then we are directing the flow from some of the tributaries in behind through those wetlands to improve water quality and trap the nutrients. Innovative design, never been done before, so we'll see how it works. But we have funding, we're constructing some of those projects at this point. The other thing one thing that you want to note here is that this is inner Sandusky Bay. There's no infrastructure here. And by infrastructure, I'm talking about if you have to build projects, where are the boat ramps? How do you get equipment there? Where do you store the materials to actually construct the project? There's nothing in inner Sandusky Bay. So, and the other thing is that along this, it's mostly ag land and or wetlands. Very difficult to get to the shoreline to access from the land side as well. So we ended up convincing NOAA, and we actually received the Transformational Habitat Grant, where at the Pickle Creek Wildlife Area here is a place called Bayshore. It used to be a community that was raised because they wanted to build a nuclear power plant there in the late 50s, and it didn't happen. And then it was converted over, it was basically sold to wildlife and became sort of a nature preserve and a wildlife area. We are actually constructing a staging area there with a ramp and a channel. So you can bring in barges and you can store your construction materials there, your stone and sand and gravel and your materials. And once we do that, we've actually provided the infrastructure. So all the subsequent restoration work we do in the Inner Bay, we have the infrastructure to actually support that. And the cost to do all of those projects is going to be substantially less. Okay, so this is sort of that thinking it through. It's another aspect of the landscape conservation design. Make sure you make the investment so you can build these projects efficiently and cheaply. And then finally, these projects we may end up doing. We'll see. We have a proposal that's going in shortly to NOAA. But these are what we call the inner bay wetland complexes, where we're actually create these large wetland complex with a retaining structure. They're designed to restore coastal habitat, but more importantly, we have models that we developed for all of Sandusky Bay, three-dimensional models, and that's supposed to, what it does is protects wave energy. So we'll reduce wave energy on the western portion of the inner bay by 40%. That means a lot less resuspension, so we start improving water quality, but we also create large coastal wetlands and fish and wildlife habitat. Again, this is restoration at scale, which is never done because it's expensive and nobody thinks big like this. But the only way we're going to move the needle in terms of habitat restoration and water quality benefits is to make these large investments in large projects, because otherwise you have all these little pinprick random acts of restoration that aren't connected together. All of these projects in this system are designed to work together and treat water. So this is the innovative approach that we're trying to implement. Let's go to Toledo. I don't know, you guys should recognize, I'm not sure exactly where we are, but obviously this is the Maumee River. This is downtown Toledo right here. One thing I want to point out is the Port of Toledo Facility 3 Confined Disposal Facility. And I think Sally's probably aware of this project. But we've been involved with the state of Ohio with our Healthy Lake Erie Fund. That structure is quite large. It was originally constructed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to basically receive contaminated sediments from the Maumee Channel. Now, a lot of those contaminated sediments have been removed from the river. And so about 2/3 of that facility has now been transferred over to the Port of Toledo. We made a series of investments, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, actually longer than that, where we actually upgraded that facility, raised the dikes, and because we had this Senate Bill 1, which said no open lake disposal of dredge material. Toledo Federal Navigation Channel, 650,000 cubic yards per year. Over half of what's dredged in Ohio comes out of that channel. This is the elephant in the room. The facility with the upgrades that we've made gave us about 6 or 7 years of capacity, and then there's additional investments that were made with ARPA funds now that are available, where we're going to increase the capacity between 18 to 20 years. For the last 3 years, not a single cubic yard of dredge material from the Toledo Federal Navigation Channel has been placed in the open waters of Lake Erie. 100% of that material is placed in this confined disposal facility. This is a facility, there is an area that will be able to reprocess the sediments there. The sediments are clean and use it for beneficial use. We're actually doing some experiments, placing it on agricultural fields now. It was actually used here at Glass City as cover for some of the brownfields area, and we've used it for other purposes as well. So what I want to point out is that the state of Ohio, working cooperatively with the Port of Toledo, we are trying to find solutions to your water quality problems. And I don't even want to tell you how many pounds of phosphorus are bound to that sediment that are now sequestered, are trapped and held within this facility. They're not in the lake anymore. So this is a major contribution toward phosphorus reduction. Then the other thing, we have a series of projects in this area. This is the Duck Creek project. This square, it's located right here. It's on the east side of the river. This is the Midwest Terminals facility. This is Cleveland Cliffs. This is our HBI plant. This is on Cleveland Cliffs property, and it's actually this yellow outline right here is the area where we had a H2 Ohio project. It was about an 8-acre floodplain, very degraded, full of phragmites, and it was a straight channel. And what we ended up doing was actually expanding, basically wiping out all the invasive species and restructuring the floodplain, expanding to about adding another 4 acres, so now it's a 12-acre floodplain. And we actually increased and changed how the channel moved through, and this is that area. This is that circular area. This is sort of the access road around it. And this right here, Duck Creek comes like this and it went straight. You see this brown line, went straight through. Not natural at all. It's a completely altered channel. So what we ended up doing, it went from about 1,200 foot to almost 2,000 feet of channel, put in some sinuosity. And then on the floodplain surface, which was expanded, we actually connected in a series of deeper pools. So when you have nutrient and sediment-laden water come down, it comes down and spreads across the floodplain into these pools, and then it sits there and is absorbed and processed by the wetland plants. Really cool. The other thing on the south part, they had these large piles of material. Well, we ended up putting topsoil on that, and it's all been planted. You know, I'm not a plant guy, so I don't know what's pollinator habitat, whatever that is. It's a bunch of, weeds and flowers and stuff like that that the plants like, but it's pollinator habitat. So we did a major restoration here. This project is an H2 Ohio project. It reduces the phosphorus loads by about 25% that were in the stream, and it reduces nitrogen by about almost 80%. That's what this project does. So you're looking at water quality benefit. Again, it's relatively small, but there are other areas of Duck Creek where we can expand this type of work. So this was sort of a neat project. The other thing that's really cool, Cleveland Cliffs, they've agreed to take over the long-term maintenance. It's on their property. So this is really good. The state of Ohio doesn't have to do that, but there'll be someone there to take care of the invasive species management. And we're going to continue monitoring all of these projects to assess performance. We want to make sure that the taxpayer investments, that they know what they're getting with the investments we make. Another project is the Clark Island project. And some of you may have heard about this. This is further up the river. We were just over here. We're now in this area here. This is where Walbridge Park is, and I think there's some rain up there. The island is actually this little thing that's left here. It's a remnant. It used to be considerably larger, and given the high water levels and ice and scouring conditions, a lot of the island has basically been eroded away, or a substantial portion of it has been. There's also, and so what we did is that we have a project to actually restore this island and create a wetland on the downstream side of it to help trap Maumee River water and process nutrients to trap sediments. And I'll show you that in a second. But the other thing that's being done is this is the Delaware Horseshoe Island complex here, and this is where the Maumee AOC, basically the area of concern, it's federal funding, GLRI federal funding. They are doing a major restoration of about 50 acres there. And that's habitat restoration, and there will be some water quality improvements. And what we did is join forces with the AOC, where our state H2 Ohio dollars are being not matched, but combined with the federal dollars. And we have a single contractor that is actually constructing both projects simultaneously, so that it results in a substantial cost savings for both the state and for the Maumee AOC, for the federal government, okay? So what does that project look like? This little red area right here, this is the size of the island as it is today. It's pretty small, not much left. And what we'll be doing is expanding it on the upstream side. We'll actually be putting in a sort of a barrier, a rock sort of stone barrier to help stop the erosion, but it will be open on the downstream side. There will be a pool down here with a whole bunch of habitat structures so that water flows in, it slows down and sits there for a while, and the sediments are trapped and the nutrients are processed. We're also working on the very downstream side of Horseshoe and Delaware Island. This is what our H2 Ohio investment is being used for. So this is a really innovative way to see if we can help restore what used to be a historic island there, but also have it so it provides water quality and nutrient benefits. So, H2 Ohio program. I have one more slide after this and then I'm done, okay? So I'll give you guys a heads up. This is just sort of a summary from our H2 Ohio program. This is Governor DeWine's signature program that began in the spring of 2019. Some of you may have been on the boat ride we took down the Maumee River, I think it was in May, where we actually had legislators and directors on board, and we actually convinced them to fund this work. And it was what they saw in the Maumee River and as we went out into the Western Basin that helped drive that decision. But this is what the Ohio Department of Resources, actually these numbers are out of date, but it's a good indication. 141 wetland projects, and right now, these are state dollars, $114 million spent since 2019. In terms of updated numbers, There are 77 projects currently under contract. We have completed 55 of these wetland projects. So there's 77 of them that are currently being constructed and built right now that are being funded. And as Janita mentioned, there are additional projects. We have an additional 2 years of appropriation from the legislature. So we could very easily see this number go over 200 wetland restoration projects here in the next year and a half to 2 years. And this gives you an idea of some other things we do. We've spent about $4.3 million in terms of, we have this consortium of universities to actually monitor the wetlands that we build so we can assess the performance. We can actually document how much sediment and how much in the way of nutrients are being removed. We're trying to justify the work that we do and then document the success. But also it gives us a chance to evaluate the different types of wetland designs, and then we find out which of those designs work and which don't. That means we can invest in more effective designs in the future. And we're looking at other different types of programs. There's a WQIP program where we're investing with private property owners. We're also working with the Department of Agriculture on numerous projects. And I believe down here at the bottom, this is something, trees have been planted in wetland buffers. I know Janina's mentioned to me that you folks were involved with the H2 Ohio projects. And we're very instrumental in terms of a major tree planting effort on at least one of our projects. And one of the things I want to say is that we are looking for partners. And I understand that you have an environment committee. Kevin Niemer, and that's the sheet that's on the table here. His contact information is there. He sort of manages a lot of these projects, but we're also going to be giving a webinar on the H2 Ohio programs and ways to become engaged, and that'll be in early October. But definitely contact Kevin, because I think we are looking for partners to work on many of these projects. I'm also thinking that some of the longer term maintenance and monitoring work might be something that could be of interest to the Rotary Club as well. So, and then finally, where are we working? This is a map of our H2 Ohio projects. This is, I think, was just updated in early July. So there's a few more since then. But if you're wondering whether or not we do anything up in Northwest Ohio, I just want to make the point. Where we first started, this is the Maumee River watershed and the Sandusky River watersheds. You can see that our initial focus was up here in Northwest Ohio. And so we are doing a lot of work in the Toledo area, and we are doing a lot of work in the watersheds. And it's not just us, it's the Department of Agriculture, it's also Ohio EPA. Okay, and we are starting to make a difference in terms of reducing the amount of phosphorus and nutrients that are coming into the system. We're not going to see an immediate result. We still have harmful algal blooms. We probably always will, but we want to reduce the frequency and the size of those blooms, and we don't want them to be toxic. Okay, and we are working that way, but it's going to take time. It took us decades to create the problem, and we're not going to solve it in a year or two. This is going to be a long-term set of investments, but these wetlands that we are constructing here, these wetlands not only provide water quality benefits, but it's also fish and wildlife habitat, and it's recreational opportunities for all of these communities in the upland and also along the coast. The other thing I would say is that more recently, we expanded the H2 Ohio program statewide. So we're focusing more up in Northeast Ohio, and then also in the Ohio River watershed now. And one of the things that we just started doing for the Ohio River watershed, we are now making it a competitive program. Before it was sort of what I call over the transom, where people will come and say, hey, I've got this project, we'll take a look at it, and then we'll see if we can fund it. Now it will be a competitive program. And so we're moving into a little bit more formalized approach, but we think it will bring in additional projects. So, I want you to understand that Northwest Ohio is a focal point of our work. And we've made significant investments, and we continue to make significant investments, especially along the coast, but also in the upland areas. And all of these projects, hopefully, are designed to start to work together, just like at Sandusky Bay. The idea is many of these projects are designed to work together in the upland areas as well, so we can maximize those water quality and benefits. And there's also a lot of active research being done at Ohio State University and the other universities as well in terms of better understanding how these nutrients move across the landscape and down through our waterways into the lake. So that's my presentation for today, and more than happy to answer any questions you may have. I don't know how I am on time. Oh, 1 o'clock. Yeah, perfect. No questions. Yeah, I can stay.
Yeah, excellent. Scudder, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. That was so informative. He will be willing to stay behind for questions, but since we're already a little bit over, if you have questions, come see Scudder after. So Scudder, I have a copy for you of Historical Tales of Toledo as a thank you for being here today. This was authored by our past president, Clint Mock. We'll also be making a donation in your name to the Polio Plus campaign. So thank you for being here.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Join us next week on August 28th when we'll be joined by guest speaker Brian Blair, who's the Vice President and Director of Athletics at the University of Toledo. There is only one committee meeting today. That is the Program Committee. We'll be meeting in Summit A. Unfortunately, the International Services Committee meeting had to be canceled, so we will get that rescheduled soon. But with that, go out, create hope in the world. Have a great week, everybody. We're adjourned.